So, Ken, to talk about your partnership with environmental defense.
Well, thanks for everyone being here, and thank you for inviting Gwen and myself, and I look forward to purchasing your book. I was going
to send you a copy, but no.
I was going to say, I'm surprised you didn't mention the website and the publisher and when it was available and all that. But I very much agree with the thesis of the book and the thesis you laid out when you opened up. And the thesis is that, without question, in my judgment, better companies in the future will have to find a way to address multiple stakeholders. We'll have to find a way to ensure that they demonstrate that what they do is positive, not only from a financial returns perspective, but from an environmental, a social, and also in how they're governed, a governance perspective. Helping the companies in which we have an ownership interest, we have 48 today, do that is my job at KKR, and the Environmental Defense Fund Alliance is a very important part of that effort. And in describing what we do, at least our experience is the best way is to learn by example and provide examples. And so I want to open by talking to you about how we in the Environmental Defense Fund began working together, not only because it's relevant to the broader alliance, but because it's a perfect example of the thesis I laid out. We started working together when we purchased a company called Texas Utilities, or TXU. TXU was a classic example of a very good company that could become better if it could address stakeholder issues. You may remember back in the 2005, 2004, 2003 period, TXU found itself in the middle of the national debate over climate change. And the result was this good company, which had to provide more energy to the growing population of Texas, found it had a hard time expanding. It wanted to build 11 new coal-fired plants. Environmental advocates said, no way you're going to build 11 new coal-fired plants. They were caught in the middle. And the result was that the customers in Texas didn't feel like they were getting the kind of power they needed when they needed it, didn't feel like they were getting the results they needed, didn't feel like they were getting the focus they needed. And so when we purchased TXU, we approached that purchase, as we do all of our purchases, with an investment thesis, which is, what can we do over a period that we own the company, our typical ownership period is 7 years, in order to, during that period, create more value for our investors by making the company worth more. And a huge part of that thesis involved the environment. And we basically said, how do we expand TXU in an environmentally conscious way to, instead of making it the center of the debate on climate change from a negative perspective, make it a market leader from the perspective of embracing the kinds of changes that utilities are going to need to make all over the world to deal with climate change. And so how do we accomplish that? They were going to build 11 new coal-fired plants. We canceled 8 of the 11. We doubled their investment in wind power. We committed to, and they're working to offset 100% of the new coal emissions for the 3 new coal-fired plants that would be built, and then reduced by 20% from 2005 levels of NOx and SOx and mercury, to set up a sustainable energy board, to set up a low-income advocacy program for people that couldn't afford their heating and their cooling. This company had some problems with unions. We sat down with the unions. At the end of the day, this was a buyout that was endorsed by Environmental Defense, and it was enhanced by Environmental Defense, by the Natural Resources Defense Council, by the AFL-CIO, and by the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. All of these are examples of, this is an example of a company that will be worth more when we sell it than when we bought it, because it's a company that's embracing these stakeholder issues and these stakeholder concerns. What's also interesting to me is this. If the Texas legislature had wanted to bring this together, I think we had a hard time doing it. And if this was a public company, it would have had a hard time doing it, because the quarterly reporting burdens would have prevented them from making the kind of investment we're talking about. So one of my arguments and theses is not only that your argument is correct, but that the model that we and some other firms like us have, which is long-term owners, economics driven by what the company's worth in 7 years, not by each quarter's quarterly numbers, gives you an opportunity to make the kind of investments you need in order to make sure that stakeholder issues are critical, are addressed, and therefore that the company's value increases because you're doing this. We have expanded this alliance with the Environmental Defense Fund to beyond TXU to apply to a number of our other U.S. portfolio companies. Our goal is to apply it across the portfolio. We're in the process of doing it now. We got together last May. we said, what did we learn from TXU? How do we apply it to the future? And what we really said is, to be honest with you, how do we take the way that we operate and make companies worth more and apply a green filter on it? How do we make sure that we use the same metrics-driven approach, measurement-driven approach, operations-focused approach, long-term thinking approach, and in addition to apply from a financial perspective, apply it from a green perspective, and that's what Gwen and her colleagues help us think about and help us do. And so what we're doing right now is across our portfolio, we're working to measure greenhouse gas emissions, waste, water, and the use of forest products, And we're working as we would work with any other project we did within the company to benchmark where they are right now, to look for what are, we think, good opportunities, to measure regularly, and then based on the metrics we agree, to make sure we're setting goals. Since we've begun, we've got 2 companies that will be our pilot projects, whose participation will then help us figure out how we apply it across the board. We've worked with these companies for the past several months. One is U.S. Food Service. You may know U.S. Food Service, great company. They may provide food to this hotel. They provide food to typically chain restaurants, to some high-end restaurants, and to institutions, whether they be universities, hotels, and others. Obviously, they spend a lot of time, a lot of money shipping. And so our goal for that company is to say, how do we reduce the fuel use per ton of product that they ship in a way that will significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions and in a way that will save money for the company? And that's very important. How do you do this in today's environment? You do it by focusing on things you can do to save money. If our companies use less energy, if our companies use less, Dollar General is a company we own. They began a cardboard recycling program recently. That program will go from costing the company money, the cost of the cardboard waste, to providing them $20 million a year in revenue because of the fact that that's good economics and good for the environment.